The year was 2347, and Earth had forgotten what freedom felt like. For 60 years, the Valorian Dominion had ruled over humanity with an iron grip. Their massive ships floated above every major city, blocking out the sun like metal clouds. Humans worked in mines, in factories, and in fields. They were not citizens. They were property. Park Yuna had never known a world without alien masters. She was born into occupation, raised in fear, and educated in secret. But she was brilliant, and the resistance needed brilliant people. At 32 years old, she worked in a hidden research facility deep beneath Mount Baekdu, studying energy patterns that the Valorians did not want humans to understand. On a cold winter night, her equipment detected something strange. 3 kilometers below the mountain, there was an energy signature unlike anything she had ever seen. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat, steady and ancient. She called her colleague Kim Suman to look at the readings. Suman was an engineer, practical and careful. He studied the data for a long time before speaking. "This is impossible," he said. "There is nothing down there. The geological surveys show solid rock." "The surveys are wrong," Yuna replied. "Something is there. Something alive." Suman looked at her with worried eyes. "If we investigate without permission, and the Valorians find out, they will not find out." Yuna was already gathering her equipment. "Are you coming or not?" Suman sighed. He always followed her into trouble. It was his curse. They descended through tunnels that should not have existed. The walls were smooth, too smooth to be natural. Ancient symbols covered the stone, written in a language that looked like Korean but older, much older than any writing Yuna had ever studied. The air grew warm as they went deeper, and the energy readings on her scanner grew stronger. After 3 hours of walking, they found it. A massive cavern opened before them, lit by a soft blue glow that came from everywhere and nowhere. In the center stood a crystalline pod, tall as a man, filled with swirling mist. Inside the pod, Yuna could see a figure, a man. He wore armor that shimmered with faint light, black and silver, covered in the same ancient symbols as the walls. Around the pod, machines hummed quietly. They were covered in dust, but still working after what must have been thousands of years. Screens displayed information in that old language, warnings and messages that Yuna could not fully read. "This technology," Suman whispered, his voice shaking, "this is not Valorian. This is not anything I've ever seen." Yuna stepped closer to the pod. She could see the man's face now. He looked young, maybe 30, with strong features and black hair. He could have been any Korean man she might pass on the street. But he was sleeping in a tomb that predated human civilization. On the wall behind the pod, she found words she could partially understand. They spoke of a great war, a terrible enemy called the Silence that had consumed galaxies. They spoke of warriors created to fight this enemy, enhanced beyond normal human limits. They called these warriors guardians, and they spoke of the last guardian placed in eternal sleep, waiting for the day when humanity would need him again. Yuna reached out and touched the pod. The crystal-cracked light exploded outward, so bright that Yuna and Suman fell backward, covering their eyes. The machines around them roared to life, screens flashing, alarms singing in tones that had not been heard for 10,000 years. When the light faded, the pod was open. The man inside was standing. He looked at Yuna with eyes that glowed faintly gold. He did not speak. He simply studied her, studied Suman, studied the cavern around him. Then he looked up, as if he could see through 3 kilometers of rock to the sky above. "How long?" His voice was rough, unused for millennia. Yuna struggled to find words. "We do not know. The writing says you have been here since before recorded history. Maybe 10,000 years. Maybe more." The man closed his eyes. A deep pain crossed his face, therefore just a moment, before disappearing behind a mask of calm. "My name is Kong Tai-ho," he said. "I am the last guardian of Earth. I was placed here to sleep until the enemy returned." He paused. "Has the Silence come back?" Yuna shook her head. "I do not know what the Silence is, but Earth has other problems now. We are ruled by aliens called the Valorians. Humanity is enslaved. Taiho's expression did not change, but something shifted in his golden eyes. Something cold and dangerous. Enslaved, he repeated the word like it was poison. By whom? Before Yuna could answer, the ground shook. Far above them, alarms were ringing. The Valorians had detected the energy pulse from the pod opening. They were coming. Taiho moved without hesitation. He walked past Yuna and Sumin toward the tunnel leading up. His armor began to glow brighter, responding to his movement, waking up after its long sleep. Wait, Yuna called after him. You do not understand. The Valorians have weapons, ships, technology far beyond ours. You cannot just walk out there. Taiho stopped. He turned his head slightly, not quite looking back at her. I have slept for 10,000 years, he said quietly. I dreamed of my brothers and sisters, all the guardians who died fighting the silence. I dreamed of the billions of humans who sacrificed everything so that our species could survive. His hands clenched into fists. And while I slept, our children forgot who they were. They let themselves become slaves. He began walking again, no more. High above the Earth, on ships orbiting the planet, Valorian sensors detected an energy signature they had never seen before. It was small, human-sized, but it burned brighter than a star on their screens, and it was rising across the galaxy. On 100 different worlds, ancient monitoring systems that had been silent for millennia suddenly activated. They sent the same message to every species old enough to remember the First War. A guardian has awakened. The galaxy held its breath. And somewhere in the endless dark between stars, something old and hungry turned its attention toward a small blue planet called Earth. Yuna ran after Taiho, her heart pounding in her chest. Sumin followed close behind, his breathing heavy from fear and exhaustion. They caught up to the Guardian in a tunnel near the surface, where the sounds of Valorian soldiers could be heard above. Please, Yuna grabbed Taiho's arm. You need to understand what you are facing. The Valorians have conquered hundreds of worlds. They have weapons that can destroy cities in seconds. You are just one man. Taiho looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at her face. For a moment, his golden eyes softened. What is your name? He asked Park Yuna. Yuna. He said her name like he was memorizing it. I understand your fear. But I need you to understand something too. I was not born. I was made. My bones are reinforced with metals that do not exist in nature. My blood carries machines smaller than dust that repair any wound in seconds. My armor can survive the heat of a star. He paused. I was built to fight gods. These Valorians are not gods. He gently removed her hand and continued walking. When he emerged from the mountain, 20 Valorian soldiers were waiting. They were tall creatures, almost 3 meters high, with gray skin and 4 arms. Their armor was thick, their weapons were charged, and they had never lost a fight against humans. Their commander shouted an order to surrender. Taiho did not stop walking. The soldiers opened fire. Yuna screamed and covered her eyes. She expected to hear Taiho's body fall. Instead, she heard something else, a sound like thunder followed by silence. When she opened her eyes, Taiho was standing in the same spot. His armor was glowing bright blue, and a barrier of light surrounded him. The plasma bolts had stopped in midair, frozen like insects in amber. Then they reversed direction. 20 soldiers fell in less than a second. They did not even have time to scream. Taiho turned to look at Yuna. We need to move. More will come. Take me to your leaders, Yuna nodded, unable to speak. She led him and Sumin through the mountains, using paths that only the resistance knew. They traveled for 2 days, avoiding Valorian patrols, till they reached a hidden base built inside an abandoned mine. Li Doyon was waiting for them at the entrance. He was a hard man, 50 years old, with scars on his face and hands that told stories of many battles. He had led the resistance for 15 years and had watched most of his friends die. Hope was not something he believed in anymore. So this is the man who caused all the alarms, Doyon said, studying Taiho with suspicious eyes. He does not look special. He killed 20 Valorian soldiers without moving, Suman said, still shaking from what he had witnessed. Doyon's expression did not change. I have heard many impossible stories. Most of them were lies. Tai-Ho did not seem offended. He simply stood there, calm and patient, waiting. Over the next several days, Yuna and Sumin told Tai-Ho everything. They told him about the rise and fall of human civilizations, the great wars between nations, the discovery of space travel, and the first contact with alien life. They told him about the Valorian Dominion, an empire that stretched across 1,000 star systems, and how they had come to Earth 60 years ago with ships that blocked out the sky. Humanity had tried to fight. They lost in 3 days. Since then, humans had been slaves. Workers, resources to be used and discarded. Children were taken from their families to work in distant mines. Anyone who resisted was executed publicly. The Valorians did not hate humans. They simply did not think of them as people. Tai-Ho listened to everything without expression, but Yuna noticed that his hands were shaking slightly by the end. "In my time," he said quietly, "humans were the most feared warriors in the galaxy. We stood against the silence when every other species ran. We died by the billions so that the universe could survive." He looked at Doyan. "And now our children bow to creatures who were hiding in caves while we fought." "We did not choose this," Do-Yoon replied, his voice hard. "We were born into it. We fight with old weapons and empty stomachs, while they have ships in orbit that could burn the planet. Then we will take their ships." Doyan laughed bitterly. "You are insane." Before Tai-Ho could respond, alarms rang through the base. Valorian soldiers had found them. Hundreds of them, surrounding the mine, demanding surrender. Doyan began shouting orders, preparing his people for a last stand. They had maybe 50 fighters with basic weapons. Against hundreds of Valorians, they had no chance. Tai-Ho walked toward the exit. "What are you doing?" Yuna ran after him. Ending this, he stepped outside into the cold night air. The Valorian soldiers saw him and raised their weapons. Their commander, a massive creature with golden rank markings, laughed. "One human? You send one human to face us?" Tai-Ho's armor activated fully for the first time. Light exploded from every seam, every symbol, every surface. His eyes burned gold, and the air around him began to shake. Snow melted. Rocks cracked. The Valorian soldiers took a step backward without realizing it. "I am not sending anyone," Tai-Ho said. "I am coming myself." He moved. Yuna had seen fast things before. She had seen racing cars and falling stars and Valorian gunships at full speed. But she had never seen anything like this. Tai-Ho was there, and then he was everywhere. He flowed through the Valorian ranks like water through sand. Soldiers fell before they could fire. Armor meant nothing. Shields meant nothing. In 30 seconds, 200 Valorian soldiers lay motionless in the snow. They were not dead. Tai-Ho had been precise, disabling them without killing. But they would not wake for many hours. The commander was the last one standing. He dropped his weapon and fell to his knees, trembling. "What are you?" he whispered. Tai-Ho stood over him, his armor still glowing, his golden eyes burning bright. "I am what your ancestors feared. I am what your histories warned you about. I am the reason your empire was told never to touch Earth." He leaned closer. "I am a guardian, and I am very, very awake." Behind him, the resistance fighters had emerged from the base. They stood in shocked silence. Watching the impossible scene before them, Doyan walked forward slowly, his old rifle hanging loose in his hands. He looked at the fallen soldiers, at the trembling commander, at the man who had done it all without breaking a sweat. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Tai-Ho turned to face him. For the first time, something like a smile crossed his face. Now we remind the galaxy who humans really are." And somewhere in orbit, a Valorian communications officer sent a frantic message to his superiors. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely type. "The humans have found something. Something old. Something terrible? Send everything." The message reached Valorian High Command in less than an hour. "High Commander Voreth, Read it 3 times before believing it. 200 soldiers defeated by a single human? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. But the footage did not lie. His analysts had studied every second of the battle, and their conclusions made his blood run cold. The human moved faster than their sensors could track. His armor absorbed energy that should have melted steel. He fought with techniques that no living species used anymore, because those techniques belonged to a dead era. A forgotten war. A species that was supposed to be extinct. Vorith opened the classified archives. Files so secret that only 7 beings in the entire Dominion had access to them. He searched through 10,000 years of records until he found what he was looking for. The Guardian program long before the Valorian Dominion existed. Before most current civilizations had even discovered fire, there was a war. An entity called the Silence had spread across the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. Stars went dark. Planets disappeared. Entire species were erased from existence in days. Only one species had stood against the Silence. Only one species had been savage enough, stubborn enough, and brave enough to fight humans. They had created warriors unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Guardians enhanced beyond normal limits. Equipped with technology that seemed like magic, willing to die in numbers that would destroy any other species, they fought the Silence for 1,000 years, losing billions of soldiers, till finally they pushed the enemy back. The cost was everything. Human civilization collapsed. Their technology was lost. Their population fell from trillions to millions. They became primitive, forgetting their own history, starting over on their home planet like children learning to walk. The other species had survived because of human sacrifice, and they had repaid that sacrifice by staying away from Earth, by letting humans rebuild in peace, until the Valorian Dominion grew too. Arrogant to remember, Vort slammed his fist on his desk. His ancestors had been fools. They had seen humans and thought them weak. They had invaded Earth, thinking it would be an easy conquest. They did not know they were stepping on the graves of giants. He sent an emergency message to the Dominion capital. A Guardian has awakened. Request immediate reinforcement. Request permission to destroy Earth. Across the galaxy, other species intercepted fragments of this message. The Corvani Collective, an ancient race of crystalline beings, immediately called an emergency meeting of their elders. The Thalian Hive, billions of insect-like creatures sharing one mind, felt a ripple of fear pass through their entire network. The nomadic fleets of Dross, wanderers who remembered the old stories, changed course toward Earth. They all remembered now. They all felt the same cold terror. On Earth, Taiho worked quickly. He knew that the Valorians would send more forces, and he needed humanity to be ready. Using knowledge from his time, he guided Yuna and Suman, 2 locations hidden across the planet. Places where ancient technology had been buried and forgotten. In the mountains of Peru, they found a weapons cache containing energy rifles that made Valorian guns look like toys. In the deserts of Egypt, they uncovered a shield generator that could protect an entire city. Beneath the ice of Antarctica, they discovered communication arrays that could reach across the galaxy. How did you hide all of this? Yuna asked as she watched machines come to life after 10,000 years of sleep. We knew we would not survive the war against the Silence, Taiho replied. But we hoped our children would one day need our help. So we buried pieces of ourselves across the world, waiting for the right time. And now is the right time. Taiho looked at her with those strange golden eyes. Now is the only time. The Valorians are not the real enemy, Yuna. They are just insects buzzing around a sleeping giant. The real enemy is still out there, in the dark between stars, waiting. The Silence. He nodded slowly. I can feel it. Distant, but moving. My awakening has drawn its attention. It knows the Guardians are not all dead. He paused. We have maybe 10 years before it reaches this galaxy. Maybe less. Yuna felt cold despite the warm air. Then why are we fighting the Valorians? Should we not be preparing for the Silence? We cannot prepare while enslaved. We cannot build ships while our people work in alien mines. First we free Earth. Then we rebuild. Then we remind the galaxy that humans are not prey. Taiho's hands clenched into fists. And then, together, we face the darkness. While Taiho prepared humanity's defenses, Doyan organized the resistance into something larger. Word of the Guardian had spread across Earth, passed through whispers and secret messages. People who had given up hope began to believe again. Slaves who had accepted their fate began to dream of freedom. Rebellions erupted in cities across the planet. Valorian soldiers, spread thin by the occupation, could not contain them all. For the first time in 60 years, humans were fighting back with real success. Huang Minho, an elderly diplomat who had spent decades trying to negotiate with the Valorians, saw an opportunity. He contacted the other alien species in the region, the ones who were not part of the Dominion. He told them about the Guardian. He told them about the silence. Most did not believe him, but some did. The old ones, the species whose records went back far enough, they believed, and they were afraid. If the silence is truly returning, one Corvani elder told Minho, then the galaxy needs humanity, not as slaves, but as warriors. As they were meant to be? Then help us, Minho replied. Help us fight the Valorians. Help us prepare for what is coming. The Corvani was silent for a long moment. We owe your species a debt that can never be repaid. 10,000 years ago, humans died for us, and we have done nothing but forget. The crystalline being seemed to shimmer with something like shame. Perhaps it is time to remember. On the Valorian flagship orbiting Earth, Vorith received his orders from the capital. Reinforcements were coming. 500 warships, the largest fleet assembled in a generation. Their mission was simple: destroy Earth and everything on it. But Vorith was not stupid. He had seen the footage. He had read the ancient records. He knew that 500 ships might not be enough. Still, orders were orders. He looked down at the blue planet below, at the small world that had caused so much trouble. Somewhere down there, an ancient monster was walking around in human skin, waking up sleeping technology, turning slaves into soldiers. Enjoy your small victories, Guardian, Vorith whispered. My fleet will be here in 3 days, and then we will see if one man can truly stand against an empire. Far below, Taiho stood on a mountain peak, looking up at the stars. His enhanced senses could detect the approaching ships. 500 points of light moving through the darkness toward Earth. Yuna stood beside him, shivering in the cold wind. Can you stop them all? She asked quietly. Taiho did not answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with memories of battles fought long ago. I have to. I am the last Guardian. If I fall, there is no one else. He turned to look at her. But I will not fall. I made a promise to my brothers and sisters before I went to sleep. I promised them that their sacrifice would mean something, that humans would rise again. He looked back at the stars, at the approaching fleet, at the darkness waiting beyond. I do not break my promises. The Valorian fleet arrived on a cold morning when the sun was just rising over the Pacific Ocean. 500 warships filled the sky, blocking out the light, casting shadows across entire continents. Each ship was the size of a mountain, bristling with weapons that could turn cities to glass in seconds. High Commander Vorith stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at Earth with cold satisfaction. The planet looked so small from up here, so fragile. He could not understand how such a tiny world had caused so much trouble. Begin the bombardment, he ordered. Start with the major population centers. I want this planet sterilized within the hour. Wang Minho had been trying to contact the Valorian fleet for hours, begging for negotiation, offering surrender. Anything to stop the attack. His messages went unanswered. The Valorians were done talking when the first ships began charging their weapons. Minho closed his eyes and prayed. Then something impossible happened. A single figure rose from the surface of Earth. It moved slowly at first, then faster still, until it was just a streak of light climbing toward the stars. The Valorian sensors detected it immediately, but they could not identify what it was. It was too small to be a ship, too fast to be a missile. It was a man. Kong Taiho rose through the atmosphere, his ancient armor protecting him from the cold and the vacuum and the radiation of space. His body had been built to survive environments that would kill any normal human. His lungs did not need air. His skin did not feel temperature. He was alive because his creators had decided that death was not allowed. The Valorian fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons lit up the darkness. Plasma bolts, particle beams, nuclear missiles, everything the Dominion had developed over centuries of conquest. The firepower directed at Taiho could have destroyed a moon. He flew through it all. His armor absorbed what it could. The rest, he dodged with movements so fast that the targeting computers could not track him. He was a ghost, a phantom. It's a nightmare that the Valorians could not hit no matter how hard they tried. He landed on the nearest warship and tore through its hull like it was paper. Inside, he moved through corridors and chambers, disabling engines, destroying weapons, leaving unconscious soldiers in his wake. He did not kill unless he had to. These were not evil creatures. They were just following orders from leaders who had forgotten the old truths. The ship went dark and began falling toward Earth, its crew alive but helpless. Taiho jumped to the next ship, then the next. Then the next. On the flagship, Vorith watched in horror as his fleet began to fall apart. Ships went silent one by one. Distress calls flooded the communication channels. Commanders screamed about a demon in human form, a monster that could not be stopped. Concentrate fire, Vorith screamed. All ships, target that creature. Destroy it now. 200 ships turned their weapons on a single point in space. The combined firepower was enough to crack a planet in half. They fired together, creating a wall of destruction that nothing could survive. When the light faded, Taiho was still there. His armor was glowing white-hot, cracks visible along its surface, but he was still standing. Still moving? Still coming? He reached the flagship in less than a minute. The outer hull meant nothing to him. The inner defenses meant nothing to him. He walked through the greatest warship in the Valorian Dominion like a man walking through tall grass, unstoppable and unhurried. Vorith met him in the command center. The High Commander was armed with the finest weapons his species had created. His personal guard, 50 of the best soldiers in the Dominion, stood ready to die for him. They had won 100 battles. They had never known fear. They knew it now. Taiho did not even slow down. The guards fell in seconds, disabled with precise strikes that left them alive but broken. Vorith fired his weapon until it was empty, watching in despair as every shot was absorbed by that terrible glowing armor. Then they were face to face. Vorith, towering 3 meters tall, looked down at the human who had destroyed his fleet. Taiho, small and still, looked up at the alien who had enslaved his people. "What are you?" Vorith whispered. "I am what your ancestors warned you about," Taiho replied. "I am the monster under your bed, the darkness in your children's nightmares. The reason your old stories tell you to never touch Earth." He stepped closer. "I am humanity's anger, given form and function. I am a guardian." Vorith fell to his knees. There was no fight left in him. There was no pride left in him. There was only fear. Taiho did not kill him. Instead, he walked to the ship's communication console and opened a channel to every frequency. Every ship, every screen in the fleet and on Earth below. "My name is Kong Taiho," he said, his voice calm and clear. 10,000 years ago, my brothers and sisters died fighting an enemy that would have consumed the galaxy. We fought alone because no one else was brave enough to stand. We died by the billions so that every species in this universe could survive. He paused, letting the words sink in. The Valorian Dominion came to Earth and made slaves of humanity's children. You forgot what we sacrificed for you. You forgot who we were. His golden eyes burned bright. Today you will remember. He activated a secondary system in his armor, one that had been waiting 10,000 years to be used. Across the fleet, screens came to life, showing images from the old war. Humans in guardian armor, fighting creatures of darkness. Worlds burning. Stars dying. The silence, vast and terrible, swallowing everything in its path, and humans. Small and fragile and impossibly brave, standing in its way. The footage showed the cost of that war. Trillions dead. Civilizations erased. A species nearly destroyed so that others could live. It showed guardians falling one by one, their numbers shrinking from thousands to hundreds to dozens to one. It showed Taiho, the last guardian, being placed in stasis while his friends died around him, so that humanity would have one final protector if they ever needed him again. When the footage ended, there was silence across every channel. Taiho spoke again. The silence is returning. I have felt it stirring in the darkness. In 10 years, maybe less, it will reach this galaxy. When it comes, every species will face a choice: fight together or die alone.
Ow.
He looked directly at Vorith. Take your fleet and leave Earth. Go back to your leaders and tell them what you saw today. Tell them that humanity is awake. Tell them that when the silence comes, we will be ready. His voice hardened. And tell them that if anyone ever tries to enslave humans again, I will not be so gentle. Vorith nodded weakly. He had no words left. Taiho turned and walked away, leaving the flagship through the same hole he had torn in its hull. Behind him, the Valorian fleet began to retreat, ships limping away from Earth as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. On the planet below, billions of humans watched the invaders flee. They watched the sky clear for the first time in 60 years. They watched the sun rise over cities that had known only shadows for generations, and they wept in the resistance base. Yuna watched the footage on a small screen, tears streaming down her face. Beside her, Doyen stood in shocked silence. Sumin had fallen to his knees, unable to stand. He did it, Yuna whispered. He actually did it. Doyen shook his head slowly. No, we did it. All of us who kept fighting, all of us who refused to give up. He looked at the screen. At the distant figure descending back toward Earth, he just reminded us who we are. Outside, humans began to gather in the streets, looking up at the sky with wonder. For 60 years they had been slaves. For 60 years they had been nothing. Now they were free, and they were just getting started. Earth celebrated its freedom for 7 days. People danced in streets that had known only fear for 60 years. Families reunited after decades of separation. Children born into slavery learned what it meant to be free. The whole planet wept and laughed and sang, releasing generations of pain in a flood of joy, but not everyone. Celebrated Kong Taiho stood alone on the mountain where he had slept for 10,000 years. The entrance to his tomb was still there. A dark hole leading down to the cavern where his brothers and sisters had placed him so long ago. He thought about going back inside. He thought about lying down in the empty pod and closing his eyes and sleeping for another 10,000 years, but he could not. The silence was coming, and humanity still needed him. Park Yuna found him there as the sun was setting. She had been looking for him for 2 days, ever since he disappeared after the battle with the Valorian fleet. She was tired and worried and a little angry that he had left without saying goodbye. Everyone is asking about you, she said, climbing up the last few meters to reach him. They want to thank you. They want to see their hero. Taiho did not turn around. I am not a hero. I am a weapon. Weapons do not deserve thanks. Yuna sat down beside him, looking out at the same view he was watching. The sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and red, beautiful beyond words. It was hard to believe that so much darkness could exist in a universe that created such beauty. Is that what you really believe? She asked quietly. That you are just a weapon? Taiho was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with 10,000 years of loneliness. I was a farmer's son. My name was Kong Taiho, and I grew rice in a valley not far from here. I had a family, a mother, a father, 2 younger sisters. We were poor but happy. He paused. Then the silence came. It took everything. My family, my village, my entire world. I joined the Guardian program because I had nothing left to lose. Yuna listened without interrupting. It changed my body, made me stronger, faster, harder to kill. They put machines in my blood and armor on my skin. They trained me to fight until fighting was all I knew. His hands clenched into fists. By the end, I could not remember my sisters' faces. I could not remember what rice tasted like. I could only remember how to kill. He finally turned to look at her. His golden eyes were dim, tired, full of ancient sorrow. I am not a hero. Yuna, I am what remains when you burn away everything human about a person and leave only the parts useful for war. Yuna reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm, despite the cold wind. He felt real. Human. You saved billions of people, she said. You freed an entire planet. You could have stayed sleeping, safe and forgotten, but you chose to fight. She squeezed his hand. That is not what a weapon does. That is what a person does. A good person. Taiho stared at her. Something in his eyes shifted, like ice cracking in spring. I have not felt like a person in a very long time, he admitted. Then let me help you remember. They sat together on the mountain until the stars came out. Taiho told her about his life before the war, about his family and his dreams, and the person he used to be. Yuna told him about her life under occupation, about the small rebellions and secret hopes that had kept her going. They talked until the sun rose again, to strangers from different ages, finding something familiar in each other. In the weeks that followed, Earth began to rebuild. Lee Doyen took command of the new defense initiative, organizing former resistance fighters into a proper military. Kim Suman led the effort to study and reproduce the ancient Guardian technology. Wang Minho worked tirelessly to establish diplomatic connections with alien species willing to help. The Corvani Collective was the first to send aid. Their crystalline ships arrived, carrying engineers, scientists, and teachers willing to share their knowledge. They were followed by the Thalian Hive, who offered their vast computing power to help plan defenses. Even the nomadic fleets of Dross contributed, providing ships and resources from their wandering caravans. They all remembered now what they owed humanity, and they all feared what was coming. Taiho worked with Tsumin to activate the last hidden facilities on Earth. In a chamber deep beneath the Sahara Desert, they found something that made even the ancient Guardian pause, seeds, thousands of them, stored in perfect stasis, waiting for the right moment to be planted. They were not normal seeds. They were the genetic templates of Guardian technology, designed to grow into weapons, ships, and armor when exposed to the right conditions. My people knew they would not survive the war, Taiho explained, as Suman stared in wonder. So they left everything needed to start again. They believed that one day humans would be ready to become Guardians once more. Are we ready? Suman asked. Taiho looked at him, at this small man who had never been enhanced or modified, who had only his courage and his intelligence to offer. He thought about Yuna, who had awakened him with nothing but curiosity and determination. He thought about Doyon, who had fought for decades without hope. He thought about all the humans who had survived 60 years of slavery without losing their spirit. As Taiho said, I believe you are. The first new Guardian ships were built, combining ancient technology with modern innovations. Young volunteers began training in combat techniques that had not been used for 10,000 years. Alliances were formed with species across the galaxy, all united by the knowledge that the silence was returning. On the anniversary of Liberation Day, Taiho stood before a crowd of millions in what used to be a slave camp. Yuna stood beside him, along with Doyon Sumin. And Minho, behind them, the first squadron of new Guardian ships floated in the sky, gleaming symbols of humanity's rebirth. 1 year ago, Taiho said. His voice carried across the planet by communication systems that reached every corner of Earth. I woke up in a world I did not recognize. The children of my people had been enslaved. The sacrifices of my brothers and sisters had been forgotten. Everything we fought for seemed lost. He paused, looking out at the faces watching him. Old faces and young faces. Faces marked by years of suffering. Faces full of hope for the future. But I was wrong. Nothing was lost. The spirit that made humans the greatest warriors in the galaxy was still there, hidden beneath generations of fear and pain. All it needed was a chance to wake up. He smiled, a rare expression that transformed his ancient face. And now it has. He raised his hand toward the sky. The silence is coming. It will reach our galaxy within 10 years. It will try to consume everything, just as it did before. But this time, it will face something it has never faced before. His voice rose. A united galaxy. A prepared humanity. A new generation of guardians, ready to finish the war their ancestors started. The crowd erupted in cheers. Ships flew overhead, trailing lights across the darkening sky, across the planet, across the galaxy. Countless beings watched and listened and felt something they had not felt in a long time. Hope after the celebration. Yuna found Taiho standing alone again, looking up at the stars. But this time, he did not seem sad. He seemed at peace. "Are you happy?" She asked the same question she had asked on the mountain a year ago. Taiho considered the question carefully. He thought about his lost family, his fallen brothers and sisters, the 10,000 years of sleep, and all the battles still to come. Then he thought about Yuna, about Doyen and Sumin and Minho, about the millions of humans who had chosen to stand up instead of stay down, about the children who would grow up in a galaxy worth fighting for. "I do not know if I remember how to be happy," he said finally. "But I think I am learning." Yuna smiled and took his hand. Together, they watched the stars. Somewhere out there, in the endless darkness between galaxies, the silence was stirring. It had consumed countless worlds. It had destroyed countless species. It believed itself unstoppable. It had never met humans at their best. And this time, humanity would not stand alone. Taiho had been the last guardian of a forgotten age. Now he was the first guardian of a new one. Behind him stood a planet full of warriors learning to reclaim their heritage. Beside him stood allies who had finally remembered their debt. The galaxy had frozen in fear when he awakened. Now, it stood ready to fight, and when the silence finally came, it would find not a scattered universe waiting to be consumed, but a united front ready to push back the darkness forever. The Guardian had awakened, and humanity had awakened with him. This time, they would win.